Good evening, everyone. Tonight, we're taking you on a journey through three real-life paranormal experiences, stories told by ordinary people in small towns across America. Some happened in sleepy neighborhoods, others near abandoned lands. But one thing is certain, they all share the same chilling question. What if something unseen is watching you right now? Stay with us, because these stories might just make you second-guess your next late-night walk. Everyone, get ready to hear today's first story. This is a true event that happened many years ago in a small town in the United States. The main character of this story is a young man named David, who was very hardworking. After his father suddenly passed away from a stroke, all the responsibilities of the family fell on his shoulders. He had two sisters and a younger brother. Arranging his sisters' marriages and supporting his brother's education meant David had to work day and night. During the day, he did small jobs, and at night, he drove a local pedicab-style taxi. Back then, especially in that small town, the streets were mostly empty late at night, and many areas weren't properly lit. David's only source of light was a small lantern hanging on the front of his bike, which barely illuminated the dark streets. One night, around 4 a.m., David returned home, but his face was pale with fear. His whole body was drenched in sweat, and his eyes and expression showed sheer terror. His family immediately grew worried, because David always returned home normally. Nothing like this had ever happened before. When they asked him what had happened, he only said, "I saw something terrifying tonight." Just saying that, he suddenly fainted. The next morning, once he regained consciousness, his family again asked him what had actually happened. Slowly, David began to tell the full story. The night had started around 10 p.m. After finishing work, he was resting by the roadside. Suddenly, two strangers approached him. They were wearing thick coats, with hoods pulled over their heads, and he couldn't make out their faces clearly. They came up and asked, "Hey man, can you take us to the end of Rajway Street?" David asked for a higher fare, and they agreed, but then they said, "We also have a body with us. You'll have to take it too." Hearing that, David froze. At first, he refused, but the two men offered him $300. At that time, $300 was a huge amount for David. Thinking about his family's future, he suppressed his fear and agreed. The men unloaded the wooden coffin and placed it on the back of his bike. David asked, "Did your relative pass away?" One of them said, "Yes, our cousin. They died in the hospital." Suddenly, the other one snapped in a harsh voice, "Shut up and just ride. Don't say a word." David froze. Still, he rode quietly. After a while, he noticed that no sound was coming from behind. In such a dark street, the complete silence felt unnatural to him. Trying to calm himself, he jokingly said, "What's the matter? Did you fall asleep with the body or something?" Curiosity mixed with dread. He looked back. What he saw next was the most horrifying sight of his life. He saw the two men pull the body out of the coffin. They were biting its arms. Their entire bodies were drenched in blood, and flesh was peeling off their skin. Their faces were so grotesque that David couldn't bear to look at them for even a second. Even in the dark, their eyes glowed like fire. David screamed, stopped his bike, and started running. While running, he repeatedly uttered prayers he had learned as a child. But his fear reached its peak when he saw that the two men and the half-eaten body were chasing him from behind. All three were running together, and their deep voices echoed, "We're going to eat you, all three of us." David ran desperately. When he reached the edge of town, he suddenly realized the three horrifying figures were now in front of him. Unable to think of what to do, he collapsed in the middle of the street, eyes closed. He recited all the prayers he knew for what he feared might be the last time. He thought, "This is it. This is the end." Suddenly, he noticed silence around him. When he opened his eyes, the three shadows had vanished. Just then, a deep voice boomed from behind. "Your mom and dad's blessings are with you. Otherwise, we would have finished you tonight." At that, David fainted again. Later, he was taken to doctors, but no illness was detected in any examination. All tests came back normal. Finally, a local healer helped him gradually recover. After that night, David never drove his taxi or pedicab at night again. This was the terrifying night that changed David's life forever. Now let's start our second story. In the quiet Midwest of the United States, there's a small town surrounded by endless fields and woods. Just outside that town runs an old river. Beside that river stands a forgotten cemetery, a place everyone in town whispers about, but rarely visits. Even in the daylight, people avoid it. Locals claim they've heard strange noises, seen shadowy figures, and felt invisible hands following them. Some call it cursed, others call it haunted. This is where Daniel's grandfather made his living. He was a fisherman, a strong, fearless man who wasn't scared of the dark. While most people stayed away from the river at night, he often fished there until 2 or 3 in the morning, bringing back his catch to sell the next day at the market. One summer evening, he and 11 of his closest friends decided to do something different. They planned to fish late at night, right near the river, by the cemetery. None of them had dared to go there after dark before. They wanted to test their courage. At exactly 9 o'clock that night, they set out. Out here, 9 felt like 3 in the morning in the city. The roads were empty. The air was still. Each man carried nothing but a lantern to guide his way. As they drew closer to the cemetery, a heavy unease settled over the group. The moment they reached the front gate, they froze. Scattered across the ground were dozens of old dolls. Their faces were twisted, their bodies pierced with long, rusted needles. The sight made their stomachs turn. Still, they pushed forward. But the deeper they went, the worse it became. They saw tree trunks streaked with what looked like blood, strange red symbols painted across the dirt, human bones half buried in the ground, shredded pieces of clothing caught on branches. The atmosphere was suffocating, like something was watching them from every corner. At last, they reached the riverbank. They set their lanterns down together, 11 lights glowing bright against the darkness. The water shimmered with the faint glow. And then, Daniel's grandfather saw it. Floating in the middle of the river was what looked like a body, pale, motionless, drifting with the current. He shouted for his friends to look. But to his shock, none of them could see it. To their eyes, the river was empty. He shook it off, telling himself it was just his imagination. He cast his fishing line into the water. The hook caught immediately, jerking downward. Excited, he pulled hard, but when the line came up, there was no fish, no bait either, just streaks of blood across the hook. Again, he cast. Again, the line jerked. Again, he pulled it up, only to find the same thing. No fish, just blood. For the next hour, every single cast ended the same way. And not just for him. None of his friends managed to catch a single fish. Not one. For a river, known for its abundance, this was impossible. Then, one of his friends whispered in terror, "I see it too, the body. Right there, in the middle of the river." Panic rippled through the group. 2 people had seen it now. The others, still blind to it, felt a dread they couldn't explain. Without another word, they abandoned their fishing gear, grabbed their lanterns, and ran back toward the cemetery gate. That's when they saw him. Standing at the gate was a man. At first glance, he looked beautiful, almost unnaturally so, but his body was bare, his skin pale against the night. They froze in horror as the man simply dissolved into thin air, vanishing like smoke. Terrified, they rushed to open the gate, but no matter how hard they pulled, it wouldn't budge. It felt locked tight. Then, without warning, one of the friends collapsed to the ground, unconscious. In a frenzy, the rest of them scaled the high stone wall, scrambling over each other in desperation. They didn't look back. They didn't try to help. All they wanted was to escape. When they reached the other side, their hearts sank. The gate they had struggled with was wide open. It hadn't been locked at all. The realization chilled them to the bone. But fear was stronger than guilt. They ran without hesitation, leaving their unconscious friend behind. They didn't stop until they reached a house far down the road. Only then did they catch their breath. Only then did it hit them they had abandoned one of their own. But not a single man had the courage to return. The next morning, word spread quickly. Local townspeople had found the missing friend at dawn, lying unconscious by the cemetery gate. Recognizing him, They carried him back to his home, but he wasn't the same anymore. His body was weak. He burned with fever. His eyes were bloodshot and unnatural, like something inside him was watching through them. And he refused to speak a single word. Out of desperation, the family called for a local preacher. The preacher examined him, staring deeply into his eyes. He pressed hard against the boy's left pinky finger, muttering prayers under his breath. Minutes passed. Finally, the preacher stepped back, his face pale. "This isn't ordinary," he said in a trembling voice. "A spirit has entered him. Not just any spirit, a powerful one, stronger than I've ever faced. I cannot drive it out." There was nothing more anyone could do. Within weeks, the young man died, but death didn't bring peace. Soon after, Daniel's grandfather and his friends began to have nightmares. The dead friend appeared to them in their sleep, his eyes burning red, his voice heavy with anger. "Why didn't you save me? Why did you leave me there to die?" No one had an answer. The guilt haunted them as much as the memory of that night. For Daniel's grandfather, it was a story he carried until his final days, a reminder that sometimes the dead don't rest. Sometimes they come back, demanding answers you can never give. Our third and final story tonight comes from California, sent in by Emily Johnson. But this terrifying encounter didn't happen to her directly. It happened many years ago, when her mother was just a young girl, around 10 or 11 years old. It was the early 1982. Emily's mother grew up in a quiet little town outside of Los Angeles. Back then, the area was more rural, surrounded by fields of corn, sugarcane, and orchards. Unlike today, there weren't grocery stores on every corner. Instead, there was a local market that only opened twice a week, on Mondays and Thursdays. Everyone from the community would go there to buy what they needed. One Monday afternoon, Emily's grandmother handed her daughter some money and told her to go to the market. Emily's grandfather was away in the city for work, and her other siblings refused to go. So Emily's mom had no choice but to go herself. She convinced two of her close friends to join her, and together they made the long walk to the marketplace. By the time they finished shopping, the sun was already setting. The sky had turned a pale orange, shadows stretched across the fields, and a chill crept into the evening air. The three girls began walking home, chatting to keep themselves company. But halfway down the road, Emily's mother's two friends stopped and told her, "You go ahead, we'll catch up later." Now, there were two ways home. One was the main paved road, longer but safer. The other was a shortcut, a narrow dirt path cutting through the farmlands and sugarcane fields. Emily's mom figured she could save time by taking the shortcut, so she headed down the narrow trail alone, carrying her bag of groceries. At first, it seemed fine. The path was quiet, except for the rustling of leaves in the evening wind. But soon, an uneasy feeling began to creep over her. The bag of groceries in her hand suddenly felt heavier, almost unbearably heavy. Her steps slowed, her chest tightened, and then she saw someone. Just a few feet ahead, standing near the entrance of the sugarcane field, was her older sister. Emily's mother froze for a moment, then called out her name, but her sister didn't answer. She just turned and slowly walked into the field, disappearing among the tall stalks. Emily's mother hurried forward, thinking maybe her sister was taking a shortcut home. She decided to wait near the other side of the field, assuming she'd see her sister come out again. But minutes passed. No one emerged. Trying to shake off the unease, she continued down the path. Soon, a small ditch appeared in front of her. She carefully stepped into it, but as she did, she felt something strange. It was as if someone was standing directly behind her. She spun around. No one was there. But the second time she turned, her blood ran cold. Her sister was standing right behind her, staring at her, silent. Her heart pounded in her chest. Just moments ago, there had been no one there. How could her sister appear out of thin air? Terrified, she tried to climb out of the ditch, but something seemed to be holding her down. It felt like invisible hands were gripping her ankles, pulling her deeper into the mud. She struggled, kicked, and pulled with all her strength, but her legs wouldn't budge. In a desperate attempt, she dropped the heavy grocery bag and used all her energy to break free. Somehow, she managed to rip her feet out of the ditch and began running as fast as she could toward home. The closer she got to her house, the more her fear grew, because every time she glanced behind her, her sister was still there, chasing her, following her step for step. Her lungs burned as she pushed herself forward, tears streaming down her face. Just when it felt like she couldn't run any farther, she heard something that made her freeze. The church bells. The local church rang its evening bells. At the exact time, the sun disappeared below the horizon, just as Muslims hear the call to prayer at dusk. And the moment those bells rang through the fields, something horrifying happened. The figure that had been following her, her so-called sister, suddenly vanished, right before her eyes. Gone, like smoke, dissolving into the night air. Emily's mother didn't stop running until she burst into her own backyard. And there, to her shock, she found her real sister, standing by the clothesline, casually folding the laundry that had been drying all day. Her sister looked up, startled, and asked, "Why are you so late? What happened?" That was the last thing Emily's mom remembered. She let out a piercing scream and collapsed to the ground, unconscious. The entire family rushed outside. They tried splashing water on her face, shaking her, calling her name, but nothing worked. She wouldn't wake up. Panicked, Emily's grandmother called for the local priest. When he arrived, he immediately sensed something was wrong. He prayed over a glass of water, reciting verses from the Bible, and gently sprinkled it across the girl's face. At last, Emily's mother gasped for air and opened her eyes. She was trembling uncontrollably. Through sobs, she told everyone exactly what had happened. But here's the chilling part. Her sister, standing right there in the yard, insisted she had never left the house that evening. She had been home the entire time, folding laundry. The priest grew pale. He warned the family to never again go near that sugarcane field after dark. He explained that many strange stories surrounded that land. People had often claimed to see ghostly figures there, shadows that looked like loved ones, luring travelers into the fields, never to return. Decades have passed since that night, but Emily says her mother has never fully recovered from the fear. Even now, as an adult, she sometimes wakes in the middle of the night screaming, drenched in sweat, shaking as though she's reliving the horror all over again. And that, dear listeners, was Emily's mother's story. A terrifying reminder that sometimes the shadows we see are not what they seem. That brings us to the end of tonight's 3 chosen stories. I truly hope you enjoyed listening to them. If something strange or unexplainable has ever happened to you and you'd like to share it with all of us, feel free to send it to us by email. Until next time, take care of yourselves and good night.